mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello, I'm Esther Githo-Ewart. It's Thursday, September 29th. This is Africa 54.
The trial of the Rwanda genocide financier Felicien Kabuga begins at The Hague. Former Guinean dictator Moussa Dadis Camara goes on trial for the alleged massacre, torture, and rapes committed in 2009. And in Washington, a conference discusses the paradox of food insecurity in the world's largest provider of international food assistance.
Felicien Kabuga, a former businessman and a long-time fugitive of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, refused to attend the opening of his war crimes trial at The Hague on Thursday. He was captured in France in 2020 after decades on the run. Paul Ndiho has more.
Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga was no-show at the beginning of his trial at a UN tribunal Thursday. Prosecutors have charged the former coffee and tea tycoon with 3 counts of genocide and 2 counts of crimes against humanity, primarily for promoting hate speech through the radio.
It is the understanding of the chamber that Mr. Kabuga is this morning well, but has decided that he would not attend today's proceedings either in person or by using the VTC facility available to him. The Chamber has decided that the appropriate course to take in these circumstances is to proceed with the trial nevertheless.
Kabuga, one of the suspects thought by a UN tribunal prosecuting crimes committed in the 1994 genocide, when the ruling Hutu majority extremists killed more than 800,000 minority Tutsis and moderate Hutus in 100 days. Prosecutor Rashid says Kabuga was a wealthy and well-connected insider.
The charges against Kabuga reflects his status as a wealthy and well-connected political insider. In support of the genocide, Kabuga did not need to wield a rifle or a machete at a roadblock. Rather, he supplied weapons in bulk and facilitated the training that prepared the Interahamwe to use them. He did not need to pick up a microphone to call for extermination of Tutsi on the radio. Rather, he founded, funded, and served as president of the Radio Télévision Libre de Mille Collines, RTLM.
Born to a modest farming family, Kabuga rose from poverty to become one of Rwanda's wealthiest men. He later moved to Kigali, where he opened several shops. According to French press reports, he went on to own a tea plantation, a mill, and among his other real estate holdings were apartments and hardware houses. As his wealth grew, so did his political connections. In 1993, one of his daughters married the oldest son of the then Rwandan president, Juvenal Habyarimana, whose assassination triggered the genocide in 1994. Another daughter married Augustin Ngirabatware, the prime minister, who was sentenced to 30 years in prison for his role in the violence targeting Tutsis and moderate Hutus. In 1994, Kabuga reportedly was to be one of the wealthiest men in Rwanda. Analysts say his money and connections helped him avoid arrest for more than 20 years as he moved from Rwanda to Switzerland, the former Zaire, and Kenya. Kabuga lived under false identity when he was arrested outside of Paris and transferred to the Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals at The Hague in 2020. His lawyers argued that he would not receive a fair trial in there or in Tanzania. They also argued that his health is too frail to transfer him to the African country. However, the court says his health is not compatible with a transfer. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
For more on Felicien Kabuga's genocide trial, I'm joined live via Zoom by David Crane, former chief prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone. David, welcome to Africa 54.
It's a pleasure to be with you today.
David, what in your perspective would be the key aspects of this trial?
Well, again, Kabuga is really a center point in the horror that was the genocide in 1994 in Rwanda. He was very much behind the entire event, which saw the destruction of approximately 1 million human beings, horrifically, by machete stroke. And so this is the last defendant that to be prosecuted for the horror that was in Rwanda in 1994. But aptly and importantly, the person that must be brought to justice. As your reporter was saying, he was very much a financier behind this, and he was really in some ways the individual who struck the match which started the conflagration that was the Rwanda genocide.
David, it's been 28 years of pain, especially for the victims, and Kabuga was on the run for so long. Would you say now that justice might finally be served?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's important for your listeners to understand that it took a long time. The man was on the run. He was hidden by Guinea for many, many, many years. Went under false pretenses into France, but he was finally found in 2020 and now is facing justice. It may seem that this took too long. Yes, sadly, many of the victims who were a product of his actions are no longer with us. But again, justice has been served, justice will be served, and he will be held accountable for his part in the genocide in 1994.
David, what should societies learn, however long a case like this takes? Does the rule of law still take its course?
Absolutely. The rule of law clearly is more powerful than the rule of the gun. And we see this right today when we see this genocidaire in court being held accountable fairly and openly for what he had done to Rwanda. And so we must take heart that wherever you are, whenever it happens, if you commit international crimes, you will be held to account.
David, thank you so much for your insight. David Crane is a former chief prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone. Now, the long-awaited Guinean trial of 11 men, including former military ruler Moussa Dadis Camara, accused of responsibility for a 2009 stadium massacre and mass rape by security forces, has been adjourned by the judge until next week. Angela Johnston has the details.
A trial began in Guinea on Wednesday in the case of 11 men linked to a stadium massacre in 2009. Prosecutors say more than 150 people were killed and at least a dozen women raped by security forces. Charges included murder, rape, torture, and theft. Former military ruler Moussa Dadis Camara is among the accused. Court was adjourned until next week, but International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan touted the start of the long-awaited trial.
Some doubted this day would come. Justice is not cosmetic. It's not a cosmetic exercise.
13 years ago, security forces fired tear gas and charged a stadium where tens of thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators were protesting, pressuring Camara not to run for president. People were shot, stabbed, beaten, and crushed. Camara has denied responsibility in the case and blames errant soldiers for the rampage. Survivors and family members say they hope the trial brings justice. Asmao Diallo said her son was killed right in front of her.
It was about time for this to happen. 13 years. 13 years of fighting, of interviews to journalists, of traveling. It was really heavy, but it was necessary to arrive today at this date of the 28th of September, 2022, thanks to the current authorities who really had the courage and the commitment to open this trial today.
Court is set to resume in early October.
Angela Johnston of Reuters filed that report. Dozens of victims who waited 13 years for the trial packed the upper galleries of the courtroom in Conakry. Here's some of their reaction to the trial.
I'm very satisfied today because today it's a solemn day for me, very heartening for me. I'm very happy. Today, really seeing the defendants before us in court, it is a big step for Guinea. I'm sure of that because the truth will be told. Not only the truth, but nothing but the truth, because Colonel Doumbouya promised and the Minister of Justice also promised, and we have seen the reality.
This first day has been very reassuring, very satisfactory. Since we did not expect a miracle today, we had to proceed with the official inauguration of the 28 September trial, then open the trial. Everything was done in accordance with the standards. All that was left to do today was to ask them if they recognized the facts or not. But the court decided to postpone the question until the next hearing.
It's a big trial. It's a very sensitive case. It's a case that has several parts. In order to respect the right to defense, the right of all the parties, we have a little preparation time before we come back to the hearing. So at our request, supported by the prosecution and accepted by the civil party, the trial is postponed to Tuesday. Time for us to dive into the documents in the file and to get to the heart of the matter.
The international investigators found the abuses could qualify as crimes against humanity, noting that brutality went on for several days against sequestered women and male detainees who were tortured. South African prosecutors say a pastor who plotted to indiscriminately kill black people and overthrow the government to reinstate white rule was handed a double life sentence on Wednesday. Authorities say Harry Nouzen, 64, the self-styled leader of the right-wing group National Christian Resistance Movement, also known as Crusaders, planned to stage a series of attacks against police, the military, and black townships. Zimbabwean author Tsitsi Dangareba has been found guilty by a Harare court for inciting public violence in July 2020 while demonstrating. Dangareba and her co-accused Julie Barnes have been asked to pay the equivalent of about $120. Failure to do so would result in a 3-month jail sentence. Dangareba and Barnes are also serving a suspended sentence of 6 months on condition they do not commit a similar offense. At least 19 people are dead in northern Morocco and dozens of others are hospitalized after consuming toxic alcohol, according to local media reports. Morocco's Director General of National Security says a 48-year-old suspect has been arrested by police in connection with the incident. Medics from Morocco's health ministry transported the bodies of victims from a roadside kiosk into ambulances at a hospital in Qusar El Kabir in the country's north. The victims are thought to have consumed the poison alcohol in the suspect's store, where investigators later found nearly 50 liters of the liquid. Moroccan law prohibits the sale of alcohol to Muslims, but it is reportedly easily found in bars, restaurants, and stores that discreetly offer it for sale. Now, despite massive mineral wealth in Central Africa, over 70% of the population lives in abject poverty. Political wrangling in the region, coupled with rebel groups competing for the vast mineral resources, has contributed to the increased poverty. And joining me now to talk about what's being done to tap into the vast mineral wealth is Francisca Tachup, Vice President of the Economic Community of Central African States. Francisca, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
This is very interesting because this is so much wealth of minerals, natural resources in that region. What exactly happens and why there are so many people experiencing economic hardship in Central Africa?
I think the economic hardship in Central Africa has diverse reasons. One of the reasons is that the country's economy are not well organized yet. We have a lack of building of industries, so we cannot process the minerals in our countries. This makes that most of the minerals are being exported, and as you know, they're not being exported necessarily by the countries as such. So there's a lot of foreign involvement in the fight for these minerals. All these reasons, together with institutional weakness, makes it a little bit difficult or greatly difficult for the people to benefit from it.
Let's focus on women and girls here, because all we hear in Africa is the women and the backbone of the society. And what is your organization, as the vice president of this organization, in terms of empowering women and girls to be economically able to do stuff for themselves?
First of all, I would like to say that my reason for being in the US is in order to do mission of investment promotion for the region. And investment promotion includes looking for financing for different activities, including women and youth entrepreneurship. Indeed, we do need to invest into women and youth. My organization has a department that treats gender issues and social issues, and we also have a department that treats economic and commerce issues. So we are looking for investors in order to enhance the participation of women and youth in entrepreneurship.
And in your view, what really stands in the way of the Central African leaders to come together with a plan that can make this vast wealth, viable and usable for their communities?
We do have plans. We do have great programs, great development programs. The implementation of these programs needs and required financing, and needs and required one voice, both by the African leaders, but as well from the foreign communities. Once that is being done, and this is why organizations as the ECAs are standing for, we will be implementing, and we have already started implementing these plans, so that the populations of our region will be able to benefit of all this mineral and wealth that we have.
Francisca, we're talking about 11 countries in the Central Africa region. Most of the people might think maybe Burundi, Rwanda, Congo. The Central African Republic, you go down south to Angola, there's so much wealth, including oil wealth. So when it comes to the rebel groups that are interfering with all the, the safety, the peace and security of that region, what is being done to make this, a gone thing, so that people don't have to fear to do business across the borders of their countries?
Now, ECA's work in creating a business environment and harmonized business environment for all of the African countries. And we also work in creating better security conditions. So all of these efforts together makes it possible that already in some of these countries, huge investments are being done.
So there's a lot more. What else do you see as the, very key to making things happen as quickly as you would like them to happen for the people of Central Africa?
We think, I think that institutionally there's still much to be done. In terms of strengthening the institutional powers of the Central African institutions, even such as the ECAs as such. We're still working, we're still reforming our functioning, and functionally there are also still some major challenges. So I believe that both there is a political will. We do have the great programs. ECAS has 5 years development programs in 5 different sectors. Most of them I have already mentioned. And we need the financing. So we call for financing of this program by our partners, by those who want to see Central Africa being developed and its wealth used for the promotion and for the well-being of its people to come and invest in Central Africa.
Very well said. I hope that happens very soon. Francisca, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Francisca Tachup is the Vice President of the Economic Community of Central African States. On Friday's entertainment report will feature legendary Ghanaian singer Julius Kojontwani, but still to come, discussing the paradox of food insecurity in the United States. Stay with us.
Strikingly identical looks, strong psychological bonds, sometimes even speaking in unison. What makes multiple birth individuals special are often the very traits drawing attention from the society. Without an understanding of what happens during the fertilization process, some communities have accorded them a special status across the continent. On this week's episode, we will be taking a closer look at how cultures across the African continent view multiple births today, and how mothers cope with raising children of multiple births in today's economic climate. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lino Khmudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other African news, the U.S. has signed a $350 million grant for the infrastructure projects with Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera hailing his record on good governance. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni is ruling out imposing a lockdown to contain an Ebola outbreak, saying the country has the capacity to contain the highly contagious virus. And as cases of monkeypox rise across Sudan, health officials say they're working with humanitarian groups to adequately respond to the surge. For more on Sudan's response to its rise in monkeypox cases, visit voaafrica.com, where VOA's Nabil Biagio spoke with the nation's director of infectious diseases. Tony Elumelu, the head of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, says the non-profit international organization is committed to empowering young Africans through youth entrepreneurship and job creation. Elumelu's foundation has signed a $20 million agreement with the U.S. African Development Foundation to empower African entrepreneurs. In a wide-ranging interview with VOA's Peter Clotty, Elumelu spoke about U.S.-Africa relations in the 21st century.
Our governments in Africa can do more. I think our governments pay a lot of lip service to the issue and importance and relevance and the future of our continent as it relates to our young ones. The future of Africa truly belongs to the young ones. Their success is our success. We must see success, we must define success through that prism. How that the success of these young ones, if they succeed, we know that Africa is succeeding and we succeed further. Our government must create the enabling environment. At the Tony Elumelu Foundation, I told you before, we funded over 16,000 young African entrepreneurs. But what is important is creating the enabling environment that will allow and support these young Africans with the seed capital we're giving them, with the mentorship we provide them, with the business education and training we're giving them to succeed. If you're an entrepreneur, a small-scale entrepreneur, and you don't have access to electricity, please tell me, what can you do with $5,000? So government must do so. Our government must put in place policies that support our young ones. You know, for me, I feel so bad about this, and truly so, because it seems to me that we make the point most times. How do we move our people out of poverty if we cannot empower the young ones? And empowering them, as I said earlier, it's not even about capital alone that we provide. It's about creating the ecosystem, the enabling environment that will enable them to succeed. So I look forward to all of us embracing this, and I think this should be the preoccupation or one of the major things AU should focus on. Youth empowerment, security issues, those two to a large extent will help us. And knowing that for youth to be economically empowered and to succeed, the infrastructure that we need, access to electricity power, so critical. Stifling policies must be removed. Tax reforms that support the young entrepreneurs must be put in place. Incentive system to shape the right behavior must be put in place. And for those of us in the private sector who have succeeded, we must realize that our success is nothing if we go alone. We need to carry others along so that they become even more successful than us. So that collectively we create a commonwealth, a system that makes it difficult for anyone to want to destroy, because we're all stakeholders.
That was VOA's Peter Clotty speaking to Tony Elumelu, head of the Tony Elumelu Foundation. 1 in 10 U.S. households is food insecure, and that has been the case for decades. In the first conference of its kind in 50 years, the White House on Wednesday convened experts to discuss how the world's largest provider of international food assistance can better feed its own people. White House correspondent Anita Powell reports.
Hunger can be hard to see in the world's wealthiest nation. But right now, 9 million American children are hungry. As President Joe Biden said Wednesday, as he opened the White House's first Hunger and Nutrition Conference in 50 years, that's a big deal.
So just last week at the United Nations, I talked about commitments we were making to tackle food insecurity worldwide. Because in every country in the world, in every state in this country, no matter what else divides us, if a parent cannot feed a child, there's nothing else that matters to that parent. If you look at your child and you can't feed your child, what the hell else matters?
Hunger is a global phenomenon, and the U.S. is hardly the hardest hit. The latest Global Food Security Index ranks the U.S. 13th worldwide. Finland tops the index, while Syria and Haiti rank last. Biden's conference sets the ambitious goal of ending hunger and reducing diet-related diseases in the U.S. by 2030. On Wednesday, he announced $8 billion in public and private sector commitments, and also plans to increase access to free school meals and expand food-related government benefits for children and families. Funding from Congress is far from assured. Republicans typically favor non-governmental means to address societal ills. Even hunger advocates note that Washington can't do it alone.
But I will say it is a very ambitious goal to end hunger by 2030. There's lots of things that the federal government can do, but it really has to be a joint effort of federal government, state government, local government, corporations, philanthropy, and all of civil society to do this.
And the challenges cross borders. Food insecurity increased during the pandemic and after the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
The pandemic and the war against Ukraine have shown us that global supply chains are very fragile, and that if we're totally dependent on them, that we're putting ourselves at risk. And what we need is more investment from governments and the private sector in regional and local supply chains.
And Springstead said, making food itself cheaper is just part of the challenge.
Economic justice really has to be a pillar here, and increasing the minimum wage to one that is really a living wage, and looking across the country, because it can be varying depending on where you live. So that's number one.
For a day, Washington focused on hunger at a time